Okay, so you know how we're always talking about being careful about what our little ones eat and drink? Like we read every single label on baby food jars. I swear I've actually sniff tested more than my fair share of pureed peas and bananas. But what about the containers themselves? Have you ever thought about that?
You're hitting on something really important. It's easy to get caught up in what's printed on the label, but we rarely stop to think about what the packaging itself might be adding to the equation.
Right. And you've been doing a ton of research on this. Stacks of articles about chemicals that could be leaching into food and drinks from baby bottles, packaging, the whole nine yards. And you asked us to, well, dive into all of it, so here we are.
What I find fascinating is that this isn't some newfangled concern. One chemical in particular, bisphenol A, or BPA as it's more commonly known, has been on scientists' radar for quite a while.
BPA. Oh, yeah, BPA free. That's everywhere now. It's like the poster child for bad chemicals. But what was it doing in everything in the first place?
Get this, BPA was initially developed as a synthetic estrogen hormone.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, way back in the early 1900s.
I had no idea.
But it wasn't until the 1960s that it really took off in manufacturing. And suddenly, it was in everything.
Yeah.
Baby bottles, sippy cups, those plastic food containers we all have in our cabinets, even lining some food cans.
Okay, so it had a past, but then what happened? Why all the alarm bells?
Well, research started uncovering some potential problems with BPA. This study from clinical and experimental pediatrics, for instance, raised some serious red flags, especially when it came to babies.
Babies, yeah, that's who I'm always worried about. What's the main issue with BPA, though? What makes it so bad?
The term you hear a lot is endocrine disruptor.
Endocrine, that's hormones, right?
Exactly. Think of your endocrine system, which controls your hormones like a perfectly balanced orchestra. BPA is like someone sneaking in and messing with the instruments, throwing the whole symphony out of whack.
Okay, that's kind of terrifying. Especially when you're talking about these tiny little humans who are still growing and developing.
Yeah.
The articles mention some serious health issues linked to this stuff.
Yeah, and that's why it's concerning. Studies have actually linked BPA exposure to a whole range of problems.
Mm.
Increased risk of some cancers, issues with immune function, early puberty,
Oh, wow.
even things like obesity, diabetes, and behavioral issues have been linked to BPA.
Okay, so I'm really, really glad those BPA-free labels exist now. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? There's a whole stack of research here about what replaced BPA. And it's not all good news, right? This article from Current Research in Food Science, this one really caught my eye.
Ah, yes, you're catching on quickly. It's like a game of chemical whack-a-mole. Manufacturers take out BPA, and then they replace it with what? Similar chemicals, of course.
Oh, no.
BPS, BPF, BPA. These are just a few.
So they just swapped one thing for another?
Essentially, yes. And while they did find low levels of these BPA alternatives in the baby bottles they tested, the long-term effects are still largely a mystery, especially for developing infants.
So we got rid of one potentially harmful thing and just replaced it with a bunch of unknowns. That's not exactly reassuring. And if I'm reading this right, it goes way beyond bottles. This research in Chemosphere about baby food pouches, that's what made me sit up straight.
It is pretty concerning, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to think about bottles, but those pouches, those are everywhere. They're so convenient. This particular research dove into the different layers of materials used in these pouches and what they found lurking in there.
Lurking is a good word. They call them NIS, right? Non-intentionally added substances. It's like finding out there are uninvited guests at your party. But these guests might be harmful, and we just don't know enough about them yet to be sure.
And we're not talking a small number of these NIS either. The researchers identified a staggering 23 different compounds.
23. Okay, now I'm officially worried. And some of them, they found them at levels higher than what's considered safe for babies, right? It's just not right. What were some of the specific NIS they found? And what are their concerns?
One that stood out was adipic acid diethylene glycol. It was found in significant quantities. We're talking 40% of the pouches tested.
40%? Are you serious?
Yeah, and keep in mind, this research focused on products available in Australia. Imagine what further studies on a global scale might uncover.
Okay, that's a lot to process. What I'm getting from all of this is it's not just about being a careful label reader. It's this whole hidden world of chemicals we need to be aware of. So where does this all leave us? I'm all about being informed, but honestly, right now I'm kind of feeling like I need a hazmat suit just to pack a lunch.
I hear you. It can definitely feel overwhelming. But you know what they say? Knowledge is power. And the fact that you're diving into this research, that's already a huge step in the right direction.
Okay, that does make me feel a little bit better, but I still feel like I need some action steps. Besides, becoming a total hermit and only eating homegrown veggies mashed in clay pots.
Well, thankfully, it doesn't have to be that extreme. First of all, remember, even though BPA is a concern, many countries, including yours, have banned it in baby bottles. So that's at least one less thing to worry about.
Oh, right. Yeah, that is a relief. But what about like the BPA alternatives? And even more so, all those NIs we were talking about. It doesn't sound like there are a whole lot of regulations around that stuff yet.
You're right. That's where things get a little trickier. While there are rules in place for intentionally added substances, like BPA, regulations surrounding NAs are definitely lagging behind.
So how do we even start to push for stricter regulations? I feel like such a tiny voice yelling into the void sometimes.
Never underestimate the power of your voice. One of the most impactful things you can do is to be a more vocal consumer. Reach out to these companies directly, especially baby product manufacturers. Ask about what they're doing or not doing to address NIS in their packaging.
Okay, yeah.
Look for companies that are prioritizing transparency, the ones actively researching safer alternatives, and support those companies with your dollars.
That's a good point. I've definitely become more aware of those kinds of companies lately. It really is amazing how much power we actually have just in choosing what we buy.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the collective power of consumers either. Supporting organizations that are advocating for stricter regulations on food contact materials, especially for those most vulnerable like infants, that can make a real difference.
Right. Sometimes it takes a village or at least like a really committed online community to get things moving. But beyond individual companies and consumer action, shouldn't this be like a bigger conversation? I mean, shouldn't governments be doing more to protect us from these potentially harmful chemicals, especially when it comes to, babies?
You've hit on another really important point. Raising awareness among policymakers is crucial. Reach out to your elected officials, share your concerns, and advocate for more research, stricter regulations on these NIAs.
Okay, yeah, that does actually feel kind of empowering. It's easy to feel helpless when you're just one person, but you're right. Our voices, our choices, they can have a ripple effect. And hopefully, as more research comes out, we'll have even more information to push for change.
Exactly. And remember, this deep dive is just a snapshot of a really complex, ever-evolving field. So as scientists continue to learn more about these chemicals and their potential impacts, hopefully regulations will evolve too.
It's interesting how this conversation has kind of shifted. We started out talking about BPA, and now we're talking about like advocating for systemic change. It's amazing how digging deeper into one issue just kind of like uncovers all these different layers of complexity.
It's the beauty of a good deep dive.
Yeah.
And speaking of interconnectedness, you made a really insightful connection earlier about the environmental impact of all this plastic.
Oh, yeah.
We've been so focused on the potential health effects for humans, but the environmental toll is another huge piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
Right. We're talking plastic bottles, sippy cups, those pouches, all this stuff that just ends up in landfills, or even worse, our oceans. It really makes you wonder if the convenience is worth the long-term consequences. It's true. We don't often think about where all this stuff goes when we're done with it, out of sight, out of mind. But the reality is, plastic doesn't just disappear.
Exactly. It can actually take hundreds of years to decompose, and in the meantime, it's leaching all sorts of harmful chemicals into our soil and water.
And it's not even just the disposal, right? The production of all this plastic in the first place, that takes a huge amount of energy, resources,
Right.
all contributing to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. It's like this vicious cycle we're stuck in. We're worried about the health effects of these chemicals, but then the solutions, a lot of times, they lead to even more problems for the environment.
It really is a case of, unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Right? But there's good news, too. The awareness of these issues is growing, and there's a lot of really cool innovation happening in the world of sustainable packaging.
Oh, that's good to hear. Like what? Give me some hope here.
Well, for example, researchers are looking into all kinds of alternatives. Bio-based plastics made from renewable resources, things like plants,
Huh.
even mushrooms, those are becoming more and more popular.
Mushrooms. That's amazing. They really are having a moment, aren't they?
They're incredibly versatile. And then there's this whole mind-blowing concept of edible packaging. Literally, packaging you can eat.
What?
Yeah. So you finish your snack, and there's nothing to throw away because you ate the wrapper too.
Wow. Okay, now that is what I call thinking outside the box. Literally.
It's not just about the materials, though. It's about rethinking the entire life cycle of these products, designing for recyclability, compostability, using less packaging overall. even exploring reusable options like those new reusable food pouches.
Right, yeah, those are becoming really popular. I've even seen some really cute ones made out of silicone. So it seems like the future of packaging might not be about finding one single magic material, but more like a multifaceted approach.
You got it. It's about moving away from this linear take, make, dispose model and really embracing a more circular approach where waste is minimized and materials are constantly reused, repurposed.
That makes so much sense. It's like taking the same principles we try to apply to, like, eating healthy and applying them to how we interact with products in general, thinking about the sourcing, the impact, the entire life cycle of a thing.
Exactly. And it's a journey that we can all be a part of. As consumers, we have so much power to influence the market just by choosing products that align with our values.
I'm really feeling that. We really can vote with our wallets, support companies that are making a positive impact, and advocate for policies that encourage sustainability and transparency. It's been quite a deep dive, and honestly, at first I was feeling a little overwhelmed, but now I'm actually feeling kind of energized. Knowledge really is power.
It really is. And remember, this conversation doesn't end here, right? Keep asking those questions, stay curious, and let's all keep exploring these important topics together.
Absolutely. This has been so eye-opening. Thank you so much for guiding us through all of this. And to everyone listening, we hope you found this exploration as insightful as we did. Remember, your choices matter. Your voice has the power to make a difference. Until next time, keep those questions coming.
Learn more at mommyhood